Good to see you. Yeah. Good morning, committee. We'll start in just a few minutes. We're waiting for J.G. Scott. So we're at ease. Good morning, committee, and welcome to the
Good morning, committee. Welcome to the Economic Recovery Interim Committee, the first of 6 meetings that we will be having over a series of a couple of months. So these are our first 2 days. The intent of the committee and the chair is to get an overview in these next 2 days of certain industries, and we'll be hearing testimony from many individuals, as you can see on your agenda. In September, the intent is to continue hearings because obviously we have a lot of economic input into our state. We want to make sure we cover as many bases as we can. So we will continue hearings September 16th and 17th. So September 16th and 17th will be our next 2 committee hearings. And then we will follow up then in October, and those committees we have not scheduled yet. But the intent of those committees will be a review of what we have learned and the discussion of possible policies and legislation to be discussed and be offered by this committee. So I want to give you some background on that. Secondly, first of all, I'd like to just recognize the researchers and advisor staff and others that have been involved in putting this together. It's quite a heavy lift. When I got this assignment, I first of all was very honored to get the assignment. Secondly, a little bit overwhelmed because this is going to be a lot of information. Our days might run long. So bear with us. It's very important, obviously, in this time of change and challenge. I want to recognize the research staff and first of all, Ed Hunter has just been fantastic. I couldn't have done the work without him. And also Don and J.G. Scott. So fantastic staff. I never underestimate what this staff is capable of. Also, we have revisers that have been involved in this, and that of course Charles and Jessica Farmer from research. And Adam Sabers, I'm so sorry, Adam. I mean, what a fantastic staff. I think we need to give them a round of applause. We couldn't have happened without them. Also, I want to recognize my personal committee assistant, Debbie Marcio, who has been not only stellar in the Senate Commerce Committee, but also has been obviously extremely busy over the past week or 2 with this heavy agenda. So, Debbie Marcio, thank you. All right. Let's get the party started. Also, I will mention that we will have people on Zoom. So thank you for the IT staff that they are here for setting that up for us. It's going to be really great. So wanted to recognize them as well. So let's kick this off, JG. Let's hear about where we are with the general fund profile. Welcome, committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you should have 2 profiles in front of you. One of them is a green one and one is yellow. They look a lot alike, so we put them on colors. We'll start off with green profile. These are pretty standard profiles. I'll just review real quick. What we do is we try and put together a very brief summary of where we are financially. We look at our beginning balance, add all our revenues, come up with the money that's available, list out the expenditures, and come up with an ending balance. Pretty straightforward to talk about, less easy to put together. But so what we have here is our 2018 and 19 actuals. We're really close to having our actually 2020 approved, but we still have some shifts that are being made in some of the revenue and some of the expenditures, so it's really close. But then we have the approved 2021 from last session, and estimated 22 and 23. And all of the estimates in 22 and 23 are only KORD estimates. Okay, so when we look at the approved 2020, started the year off with $1.1 billion in ending balance. That was almost 16% of our total expenditures from the previous year. We brought in our estimated revenue from the consensus at $6.8 billion, which is a large reduction from the 2019 actuals. The largest reduction in that is due to a shift of almost $646 million from 2020, was going to be due in April of 2020, and then is moved to July of fiscal year 21. So we reduced revenue by $646 million and then increased it by that amount in 21. So when we had the $1 billion that we had, the $6.8 billion that we have in our estimated revenue comes up to about $7.9 billion in total available expended or revenue.
Our approved expenditures were $7.8 billion, leaving about $90 million in the bank for the ending balance. We take that $90 million, move it up to our beginning balance. The estimates for 2021 that we did in April were $7.2 billion. In here, we do have the governor's allotment plan. In January, part of July, the governor made her allotment plan. Some of the adjustments need legislative approval to make. Others, the governor can reduce those expenditures on her own. But this is the total plan. So in her plan, there was additional revenue of almost $67 million comes in for a total revenue available of $7,586 million. If we looked at the approved expenditures for 2021, that was right at $8 billion. Continue on with the governor's allotment plan. That reduced expenditures by $437 million, bringing the expenditures in line with the revenue that was available. So it goes to a zero ending balance. Okay? So we start off 2022 with a zero ending balance. When we look at those shifts, remember we talked about those shifts, $646 million almost, coming out of 20, going into 21, because that is not going to occur twice. We had to pull that $646 million out of 2022. So when you look at those estimated revenues, it goes from $7.4 billion in 2019 to $6.8 billion, that drop in 2020, 2021, up to $7.2 billion, and then in our estimated 2022, it drops back down to 6.6 billion. And for this purpose, in all of the previous profiles we had done, the governor had indicated that her plan was to reduce the state highway fund transfer to zero transfer in her final year. So in 2022, stepping that down, it would be about a $79 million transfer from the highway fund into the state general fund. But these are all just estimates and may change. So when we then look at our expenditures for 2022, what we used was the ending expenditures for 2020 and moved that up for the start. We don't have any type of an approved budget as far as expenditures go for 2022. So we assume that what we did last year will carry forward into the next year. So the starting expenditures would be that $7,586 million. And what we would estimate for caseloads, human services caseloads, about 80 million. School finance, when we project those out, we would expect that to be about 112 million. The governor's allotment plan, a good portion of the allotment that we made in 2021 would not be repeated in 2022. They were one-time reductions. So we had estimated about 370 million of those expenditures would be one-time and not be moved in. So we added that back in to our estimates, creating a shortfall of about $1.4 billion. So we reduced those expenditures by that $1.4 billion to come up with a zero ending balance. The chair wanted to know if we were to meet all of the statutory requirements, what would it take? Included in that then would be a 7.5% ending balance. Statutorily, we have a 7.5% ending balance. And I do need to mention, in our transfers in the revenue at the top, we do have our statutory transfers of the local ad valorem tax reduction fund of 54 million, the county city revenue fund about 78 million, the special city county highway fund transfer of about 13 million. So there is $160 million that we put in because those are statutory transfers that we haven't made since 2003, 2004. But since they're statutory required, we include them. So going through that process then, the ending balance would be $468.5 million. The total adjusted expenditures then would be $6.2 billion, a reduction of over $1.9 billion would have to be made in 1 year. Moving forward then into 2023, the ending balance would be that $168 million. The revenue that we had estimated internally would be $6.8 billion, creating about $7.5 billion available. Looking at those expenditures as a base increase of that $6.2 billion, which is reduced by $1.9 billion, would be moved into our starting for 2023. That would be assuming that all of those reductions were base reductions and carried forward. We would create additional expenditures of about $85 million in 23 for human services caseloads. And school finance would be estimated about $150 million, bringing an ending balance of a positive $1 billion. Now, realistically, we're not going to be able to cut $1.9 billion out of a budget and have that as a base. So there would be a lot of flexibility on increasing those expenditures qualify if you want to keep a 7.5% ending balance, probably in the neighborhood of $500 million or so. Do you want to mention that we now do have money in our budget stabilization fund? In the appropriation bill, it is indicated that 50% of all of the money that came in above the consensus revenue estimates would go into the state budget stabilization fund. So we had about $163 billion above our estimates at the end of last fiscal year. We moved those, 75 million of that would be in our ending balance, and 81, almost 82 million of that would go into the budget stabilization fund. So that would be available to spend for this purpose. We just showed that as not being spent for the entire year. So you'd have 82 million, it would increase the ending balance that was not spent to 550 million in 22 and 1.12 billion in 2023. The other profile that we put together, the yellow one, has the exact same information, except instead of reducing all of those adjustments needed for the ending balance and 7.5% out of expenditures, we put it in as additional revenue. So once again, to get to a zero ending balance, we would have to, in 2022, increase expenditures by the same amount. But because we did not reduce expenditures, that 7.5% ending balance would go up. It would go from about 470 million up to a little over $610 million, leaving then an ending balance of that 611.3 as 7.5% ending balance. Moving that ending balance with the 7.5% ending balance included in 2022, the 612 million that we start with, we would have to increase another 936 million. This is not another, this is 936. The expenditures continue to build. The revenue is a one-time increase. So the increase that we would need for 23 would be 936 million to get to that zero ending balance. That would be less than the previous increase. And the adjustment to a 7.5% ending balance would be $629 million. So when we look at revenue and expenditures, normally there's some type of combination when we're looking at budget deficits, budget increases and budget decreases, and some type of revenue adjustments as well. Overall, that's a big picture view. I would say that our estimates for 2022 are pretty conservative. So very easily could be much more of an increase in 2022 than we have here. Having said that, I would like to come in and say, yeah, we got more money than we expected rather than less. And when we look at those estimates for 22, the consensus revenue estimates that will happen in November, we'll be making those adjustments there as well. But that's that big picture view of where we are with some conservative revenue estimates.
Kind of a sobering picture, JG.
Yeah, I know. We're back into anytime I walk into a room, everything goes down.
Well, and precisely why I think this committee is very important moving forward and so many unknowns. I'll open it up for questions at this time, if there are questions. Well, I guess I have a question now. And I know this is probably a very open-ended question, but, you know, what kind of a shell game do you think we're going to need to play if indeed we have a very more sobering revenue estimate coming forward? Because obviously you have to do a lot of shifting around. Obviously we're going to be faced, regardless, I think, of having to cut, and the governor's done a little bit of that so far. But, you know, as you approach something like this, I guess I'd like to know a little bit about the process, about how you get to your numbers, and how you're thinking as you shift things and put things forward, and you're using a lot of, you know, institutional knowledge that many of us don't have. So just walk a little bit through how you get to this ending balance, and kind of some of the things you have to do on a high level.
You know, when I was talking about the projections that we have, our revenue this year, or last fiscal year, came in about $163 million more than what we've anticipated.
Some of that could be a base increase that will continue on, so that will be reducing some of the
balances that we have here. I really do believe that realistically, if we look at the actual receipts, it will be less going in those out years. But when it gets down to it, you know, we would look at, you know, all of the revenue available in the different places. And nobody likes to ever talk about it because we've worked so hard at reducing those transfers from the state highway fund. But in total, you know, that's a $500 million that is transferred. You know, like I said, I need you to mention it because, you know, the legislature has worked so hard to get that number down. That would be available. When we look at those expenditures, we would look at reducing some of those expenditures that are out there based on some additions that have been made. The governor did make a lot of those in her allotments that reduced those. We would go back and look at some of those other adjustments. It would be sitting down and really prioritizing with the appropriations and ways and means committees on what those expenditures are, what those priority expenditures are. Those would be funded first, and then after that, we'd be looking at getting into the core of state government if needed. Though nobody ever likes to talk about as well. Anytime we have that type of a shortfall, there's also revenue that could be looked at. Some money that perhaps hasn't been taxed before for services or for sales tax on the stuff that comes into the state that we don't currently collect on. There could be some tweaking with some of those. I mean, those would be looking at the things that might be available.
Thank you, and thank you for the response. You know, a lot of these numbers are a little bit, you know, overwhelming when you walk us through, and you know, I appreciate that you're being very frank. So, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, JG. Okay, up next, we have Eddie Penner, who's going to walk us through our tax receipts. You have been very busy, Eddie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Got a note from our staff. We're kind of coordinating online. I think that font 3 might be a little hard to pick up on, so I'm probably going to be talking what will seem strangely loud to you in the room, but it's for the benefit of the online streaming piece of it. You should have in front of you 2 documents that I'm going to be speaking from today. The first of which is a stable packet that begins with a table with a lot of numbers on it. Some of those are in red, and then it moves on from there to some hybrid charts of bars and lines. The second of which is a packet stapled together of kind of a listing of states. We're going to start with the packet that is the table and kind of the line and bar. What this does is we've kind of converted some key tax sources and our total taxes based upon monthly receipts into calendar year-over-year comparisons, so that you can see the effect of the pandemic, the associated economic effects, the associated policy changes to the volume, in terms of the effects directly upon the tax receipt. Typically, when we look at tax receipts, we tend to compare fiscal year over fiscal year. However, because of the timing of the pandemic and all of the associated downturns with it, it makes a bit more sense than this to compare calendar year over calendar year. And so that's kind of the way this is arranged. The difference, the table that you have here at the beginning is actually 5 individual tables. Individual income tax receipts, the first one. Corporate income tax receipts, the second one. Sales tax receipts is the third one. Use tax receipts is the fourth one, and then total tax receipts is the fifth one. This does not, the total taxes, I should be clear, does not include kind of the other SGS revenues that we have, the transfers in and out of state general funds, the agency earnings, the interest. This is just taxes. And so you can see that this is broken out into the monthly specific items and then also the cumulative year-to-date items. And so you can see, really for all of those tax sources, through January and February, the 2020 amounts were running ahead of the 2019 amounts you might have expected. And so you can see that the differences there show up as positive. So the difference is the 2020 minus the 2019. Beginning in March, you can see one tax source had its monthly amount, the corporate income tax amount, fall behind the 2019 amount for just the month of March only, but the cumulative amount stayed ahead for the source. As you can see in April, the story changes a little bit. April has individual income and corporate income falling substantially behind where they were in 2020. However, there's some explanation for that aside from just the pandemic and associated economic consequences. However, the sales tax receipts for the month of April, you can see that the amount for 2020 fell behind 2019 by some $16.4 million. Use tax receipts still managed to hold ahead of the prior year amount. However, they have the entire way through, and I'll touch on a reason for that when we get more into use tax receipts specifically. As you can tell, by the time we get to April, the total tax receipts have fallen substantially behind $610.7 million for just the month of April and $463.6 million for the calendar year to date. That that issue continues into the month of May, where you see the monthly amounts for individual, corporate, and sales tax falling behind, but the use tax once again still holds steady, and so we added another $114.4 million for the month, that the total tax receipts have fallen behind the previous calendar year. June, the story is largely still the same. Individual and corporate income tax receipts, the 2020 amount was behind the 2019 amount. However, sales, the 2020 amount did exceed the 2019 amount, and the use tax continued holding strong. We'll talk about maybe some reasons why that might have happened when we get into the line graph parts of it for the individual sources. And so the entire amounts were still behind by $37.4 million, June of 20 over June of 19. And then we've got July of 20 versus July of 19. This is the first month for fiscal year 21. And we do, in that month, we see actually kind of the reverse effect in many ways. And I'll talk about some of the reasons for that, where we actually had $395 million more in individual income tax receipts and $54.6 million more in corporate income tax receipts in July of 20 than we did in July of 19. We also had $14 million and $11.3 million more of sales and use tax receipts in that. And so for the month of July, we had $484.6 million more in cumulative tax receipts than we did in July of 19. The biggest reason for that, of course, is the shift of the deadline for so many filings, both for your annual return, but also for the estimated payment from April 15th to July 15th. But the kind of bottom line number, and it's the farthest right number on the very bottom line of this chart, shows that we do still have, for the calendar year, $130.8 million less in tax receipts for calendar year 2020 than we did at this point for calendar year 2019. And so the following 5 pages of this packet are the line and bar graphs associated with the data that is on this front page. And so it might actually be, what I just did, and might be most helpful for you, is to keep those numbers handy in front of you as we flip through the individual line graphs and talk about the individual sources. If I were a more skilled Microsoft Excel document producer, I could have put the numbers there on that page. I'm sure that somebody else in my office knows how to do that, but for purposes of this, you might just need to tear off that front page. So the first chart is individual income tax receipts, the first chart in my graph. For all 5 of these following graphs, there are bar graphs that are the monthly amounts, and they align to the axis on the right side of the graph. And there are line graphs that are the cumulative amount for the calendar year to date, and they align to the axis that is on the left side of the graph. I just want to make sure that everybody kind of knows exactly what they're looking at. The blue bar is 2019, the orange bar is 2020, the gray line is 2019 cumulative, the yellow line is 2020 cumulative. And so the main thing that you see as you look at the individual income tax is what we talked about earlier, that through the first 2-3 months of the year, 2019 was kind of holding steady by a small margin ahead of 2020 was holding steady ahead by a small margin of 2019, as you might have expected. April is when things go substantially different there. You can see that we had $525.6 million less individual income tax receipts in April of 20 than we did in April of 19. Of course, that included 2 shifted deadlines, the individual return and the first quarter estimated tax return were shifted from April 15th deadline to July 15th deadline. Those combined shifts for the individual income tax source were associated with a $560 million estimated shift of money from FY20 into FY21. Now, to make sure that we're completely clear on that $560 million, that is not all April money necessarily, and it is not all July money necessarily. Even though the deadlines were both shifted from April 15th to July 15th, the reality is that money doesn't all come in checks that are opened in cash on July 15th. However, the bulk of that money is expected to be April and July money, but there's some kind of trickle through in May and June money that was shifted from fiscal year 20 into July and some further months in fiscal year 2021. And so you can see that it's kind of the same story, but to a smaller scale in both May and June, the fiscal year 2020, calendar year 2020 amounts lagging behind the 2019 amounts. You can see in July, however, we had $395 million more in individual income tax receipts. You might note that $395 million, that is not $560 million. The reality is that money is going to be spread out. Taxpayers who filed for petition, we will see some of that coming, we expect in October. A number of those taxpayers in times of recession, we anticipate will go on to payment plans. They usually don't have the money to pay the taxes in light of the kind of economic situations we see right now. And so the Department of Revenue will be working with those taxpayers to get on payment plans for that tax obligation. And the other thing that there's no way to say this with certainty, but that we do believe is the case, is that you might recall that in May and specifically June, our individual income tax estimate, our individual income tax receipt beat the estimates for those months, where we actually ended fiscal year 2020 with, I believe, some $48 million in individual income tax receipts in excess of what our April estimates were. What we believe at least a portion of that amount was that money that we anticipated would be shifted into fiscal year 21 actually came in the last 2 months of fiscal year 20. And so we don't, at this point, we don't think that maybe all 560 million of that will come in 21. We think that maybe some of that 560 million, now we're talking the scale of tens of millions, not hundreds of millions, came in the last months of fiscal year 20, and not as many taxpayers waited until all the way up until that July 15th deadline to make those payments, as we had previously anticipated. And so that is kind of the story on individual income tax. That's all the comments that I have in mind. I would actually kind of defer to the chair. She wants me to pause here for questions on this source, or if I should keep going and pause the call.
Are there any questions? Senator Solontrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your discussion with the Department of Revenue or anybody in that capacity, based on the challenging economic conditions that we got going right now, is there any forecast out to what kind of potential reduction in various tax revenue streams we might see for next tax year? In other words, income is down substantially across the board. Tax revenue is going to be substantially down across the board. Have they looked at or projected at all what they think the calendar year tax reduction might be?
So for fiscal year 21, we do have, of course, the consensus estimate, and that was made in April, and it's still kind of our estimate. We'll revise that estimate in November. That did bring that chart up here with me. For individual income tax, JG is handing it to me rather than me having to sort through for individual income tax, we cut the FY20 estimate by $620 million and the FY21 estimate by $295 million. Of course, that $295 million would have been $560 million larger were it not for the shift of money from FY20 to 21. And so kind of our anticipation then is that we reduce, in essence, the FY21 receipts by some $855 million in individual income tax alone. However, we made up $560 million of that by shifting money from FY20 into FY21. At this point in time, we don't have a consensus projection in terms of what the tax receipts will be for FY22 yet. The first projection, the initial projection for that will be made with the November revenue.
I'm sure. Have the Department of Revenue or has anybody in research looked at what primary sectors are going to have the significant reductions in calendar year taxes over next year?
Not to the extent of my knowledge.
Manufacturing or agriculture or whatever it may be.
That's something that we'll do as a part of our November revenue estimate throughout in the meetings leading up to that throughout the month.
Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up on that question from Senator County, if we're looking at the tax year 2021 and income tax, can you just go back and remind us, would those unemployment insurance payments, would those pay income tax here in the state of Kansas? And what about those TUA payments, those stimulus checks? Do they pay state income tax? And will that kind of bring us a little bit back up and make up for some of the losses that we know we're going to see?
So that's a great question. The unemployment insurance payment and the regular, the extra $600 to TUA, all of that is taxable income. And so, however, recipients of that can have tax withheld on the front end. Historically, it's been a pretty small percentage of unemployment recipients who do have that amount withheld. That the specifics on that would actually be a great question for the Department of Labor during their presentation this afternoon in terms of what the numbers of them are. We have looked at that early on in the pandemic, and at the time it was keeping in line with historical amounts. It's still a very small percentage of those recipients who are having income tax withheld. And so if they don't have it withheld now when they're receiving the payment, it would take the form of an obligation for them to pay next April when they or prior to April, February, March, April, whenever they do their taxes for next year. And so we would anticipate income tax receipts associated with that, either now in the form of withholding or then in the form of balance due payments.
So it sounds like it's not a significant percentage of those payments.
The last number I got, that's a significant number. I haven't been keeping track of those on a weekly basis or anything like that. So that might have changed, and Department of Labor is who's back on that. Following up.
Further questions?
The one other thing I was going to say though is, you also mentioned stimulus payments, the $1,200 and $500 per dependent stimulus payments, that money is not under current law taxable. And so individuals would not be paying individual income tax associated with that, absent of changing law.
Thank you for that question. I've actually had some questions about that. I'm sure other committee members have from constituents, and it's good to clarify that. Thank you. Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Eddie, Representative Williams brought up a good point. So when you sit down to do your November estimate, consensus estimates, you will be looking at all that information on unemployment, making your best protection for the rest of the year, fiscal year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. One other question, Madam Chair, is this compensating tax. Tell me a little bit why that's running so above, and my assumption is internet sales.
So I was going to touch on that when I get to the specific part with that work.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the individual income tax?
Seeing none.
Okay, great. Corporate income tax is actually in many ways kind of the exact same story as individual income tax. We substantially reduced the revenue estimate for this. The FY21 substantial reduction was offset by a shift of, we anticipated some $75 million of FY20 money into FY21 associated with that change in deadline. And similar to individual income tax, we actually at this point now kind of expect that part of meeting the fiscal year 20 receipt estimate for corporate income tax was the same thing, where not all taxpayers that we had anticipated would wait until July 15th to make their payments, did make some of their payments in fiscal year 20. And so that 75 million at this point is probably a higher estimate than will be reality. We did beat the corporate estimate for fiscal year 20, and that's kind of what we anticipate. The reason for that being, you probably noticed if you look at this bar graph that corporate is much more lumped together in just a few key months than individual. And the reason for that is that much of our, actually the bulk of our individual income tax payment comes in the form of withholding. And of course, corporate income taxes, we get estimated payments in the balance due to refund, but there's no monthly withholding that really stabilize that tax source throughout the year. And so other than that, I really don't have anything else of note to say. You can see that April was a big month for corporate in 2020, falling short of 2019. The same was true in May and June, and you can see obviously a big portion of that shortfall was offset by increased July payments in calendar year 2020. The one thing I maybe would draw your attention to, and not for any particular reason other than just it is kind of fascinating to see the severity of the impact of both the pandemic and the policy changes associated with it. You see that May receipts for corporate income tax in calendar year 2020 were actually negative by $3.4 million. We sent out more in refunds than we had in balance dues coming in the month of May, and that's not totally unheard of, but it is pretty rare for something like that. But I don't really have any corporate in terms of conceptually falls right in line with individual.
Any questions on corporate income tax? Seeing none, thank you, Eddie.
Yeah, the next table here is sales tax. This is one of our most stable, typically monthly receipt categories, with the exception of we usually have a big January that's attributed to the holiday shopping season, and then February and March can be a little lighter as people don't make quite as many purchases in the months of January and February immediately after the holiday shopping season. But other than that, this tax list tends to be really stable month to month. As you can see in the 2020 amount, April and May receipts, which are largely attributable to purchases that basically run from March 15th to May 15th. So by and large, sales tax receipts are the May state receipts are based upon sales made by retailers from April 15th to May 15th. And the April receipts are basically March 15th to April 15th. By March, there's depending on the size of the retailer, there is some blurriness to that. But as you can see, the shutdowns associated with the pandemic largely began the second half of March. And so you would expect, and you can see here, that the April receipts dropped quite a bit calendar year 20 over 2019, and the May receipts dropped by an even bigger slug, calendar year 20 over 2019. In June, we did start to see some rebound, and then obviously in July, we've seen an even bigger rebound. The one thing that you should definitely keep in mind with the sales tax receipts is that there's very substantial federal stimulus in the months of April, May, and June, in the form of those $1,200 and $500 checks going out, but also in the form of the enhanced unemployment benefits. And so that federal stimulus, we kind of think may be buoying our sales tax receipts right now, just because of how much money was pumped into the economy by the federal government stimulus packages. And obviously, that's any progression in that is something that I'm sure everyone is paying close attention to in the news, and obviously the revenue estimating process will pay very close attention to that as well. That's kind of all the comments that I had on sales tax, unless there are questions.
Questions. I just have a question. Something occurred to me with the many individuals that have not received their unemployment, and maybe Department of Labor can, we'll be asking about that. But given that I don't have no idea what the number is, but is there a way that you can calculate? I mean, I would like to see what would happen if that continues for a few more months, as opposed to getting that issue resolved and money starts flowing out. I think that's just something I hope that we can watch as far as our receipts and so forth. And certainly you'll be doing that.
Yeah, we will certainly continue to monitor all of those kind of federal programs and the timing of them, because as those claims that go through the adjudication process of the Department of Labor, it's very possible that the effects of that federal stimulus, even if there is no further federal stimulus, will continue to trickle out for several months as those claims all kind of get litigated within the Department of Labor, and the volume and potential magnitude of those claims and what their expectations are for those would be good questions to the Department of Labor.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Eddie.
Flipping now to the use tax receipt chart, and this is one where obviously you can see it seems as though this one, in terms of month over month, really does not suffer any of the things or setbacks that other receipt categories have. The orange bar has exceeded the blue bar in every month, and the yellow line has stayed ahead of the gray line in every month, and some of these months, especially July, by quite a significant margin. There are a number of possible factors that could be contributing to that. One is very well might be that more people are doing more shopping, more purchases online right now, and so that's coming in the form of use tax as opposed to sales tax. Another piece of it could be that whatever people tend to make purchases of online is maybe something that they are not pulling back on in terms of their purchasing through the pandemic and associated economic downturn. If those are more necessary, less discretionary purchases by the consumer, so to speak. But the third item, and this is one that is likely attributable to some of this, and the timing of this set of receipts we're looking at this is especially appropriate, is the fact that Department of Revenue noted 19-04 associated with use tax went out on August 1st of last year. And now if you notice that indicated to retailers making online sales that the Department of Revenue expected them to be registering and collecting those sales tax as a follow-up to kind of the Wayfair case related to online sales tax. And so you can see, it's actually really easy to see here, the blue lines in August and September have a clear increase there before they start to kind of level off in October. And with August 1st being the date that notice went out, the Department of Revenue indicated that they did see the bulk of their new registrations associated with that use tax in those kind of those first 2 months after that notice went out. They do indicate that they still continue to see new additional registrations every month associated with that. But that was the first kind of 2 months of that increase. And so that might provide some clue in terms of why use tax has stayed steady for these particular 7 months of the calendar year. Calendar year January, or month January through July of calendar year 2019, we didn't have that notice in place. And those same 7 months for calendar year 2020, we did have that notice in place. And so that might be an explanation of why the monthly receipts in this category have continued to exceed the previous calendar year. And we might, based on that kind of hypothesis, expect them to more steady, to level off in terms of that excess as we get farther into the year. So that's kind of the thing I would mention about use tax. I hope that answers Representative Bremer's questions. If not, I'd be happy to try to opine further.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you, Eddie.
And then the last kind of bar and line graph here in your package is really just kind of smashing all of these receipts together, as well as a handful of other tax receipts, privilege tax, various excise taxes, and insurance premiums tax, and motor carrier tax. And this is kind of the total tax receipt picture. It's kind of a more smoothed out version of the individual income tax graph. Really, you can see that we kind of fallen furthest behind in that month of April, and then May and June kind of further compounded it. But now in July, we really started to by and large close that gap, and the 2020 calendar year receipts have now almost, just because it's on such a large scale, caught up to the calendar year 2019 count receipts today. But it is still $130.8 million behind, but that's on a scale of $4.5 billion. So be happy to answer what the question is.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Thank you, Eddie. I find that fascinating. So is there going to be a new normal set, do you think?
Well, over the next few months, we do obviously anticipate that some more of that delayed FY20 money will appear in FY21. But the reality is that we have cut our revenue estimates, and in the CRE memos, you can see what the year-over-year amounts for that look like, and the fiscal year total tax receipt amount for FY20, that's the year we just finished, but it includes the bulk of these months. It is down to $6.9 billion. We do have FY21 at $7.4 billion, but of course a big portion of that is all of that shifted money from FY20 into 21 attributable to those kind of delays.
Senator Tyson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Eddie, for all your research and everything. I'm curious as to the breakdown of what would be the biggest impact to this. Is it the motor carrier? What taxes are taking the biggest decrease on?
Well, in terms of magnitude, the biggest decreases are individual income and.
No, on this last chart.
Oh, on the last chart. Well, the last chart this is all tax receipts. It's not just all of it. This is all.
Oh, okay.
And so
it was the other.
No. I could put together a chart of the. Sure. I will put together kind of a chart of the balance of all the others and do things.
That was thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tyson. That was a great question. Senator Stolentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it'd be safe to say that had we not had the administration's stimulus package go out and provide the numerous $1 trillion of revenue across the country, we would be looking a lot worse. From what I understand and what I read, there's still about $1 trillion plus in persons' accounts that they haven't spent yet. And so that might buoy the economy a little bit further. I think we're going to look at something different if another stimulus package doesn't happen to the extent that the past one just did. So, I know we're trying to work on that. I don't know how we're going to pay it all back, but at this point, I think a lot of those future projections depend upon how much support we get from the administration.
That very well might be the case. Of course, that would be one of our most closely monitored items as we head into November.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you so much, Eddie. Great work.
I do have one other kind of package information. This one shouldn't take near as long as that one did to kind of walk through before we hand it off to our next conference, and that is the second Fiscal package. This is a kind of rankings of states based upon their various tax rates. For the first table, it is rankings based upon the marginal rates of individual and corporate income taxes. The states are sorted alphabetically, but the second and fourth columns of numbers there are their states ranked. So for Kansas, you can see that our marginal rate for individual income tax has us at 24th in the country, and our marginal rate for corporate income tax has us at 19th. And I should clarify, those ranks are ranked from highest to lowest. And so you can see that California has the highest marginal income tax rate. So it is ranked state number 1. All of the states that have a zero income tax are kind of tied for 44th on this. And the other thing, especially for these two, this really doesn't touch at all on what their tax bases are for these tax sources. The two best examples for that are Tennessee and New Hampshire, which show up here as having tax rates, but of course both Tennessee and New Hampshire only impose the individual income tax on income from interest and dividends. They don't impose it on wage or income. And so many wage earners in those states see a zero income tax rate, but they do technically have an income tax. So that's the first page, and that information is all information from the Tax Foundation, and it is tax year 2020 rates as of, I believe, February of this year is when they had most recently compiled it. The second step, actually, the Tax Foundation has a helpful chart already produced, and so I didn't have to kind of rearrange their own data for this for us. I was just able to copy and paste their chart. You can see Kansas here has the ninth highest state sales tax rate, and the ninth highest also average combined state and lowest state and local sales tax rate. You can see that the rankings for all of the various states there. That is the second table. The third page of tables is property tax oriented, and this is data from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. This is property per capita property tax payments, and also the percentage of personal income within the state that property tax payments make up. And you can see that Kansas is ranked 23rd and 18th on those. On a per capita basis, Kansas pays about $1,550 of property tax. And this is, unlike the other two, which are 2020 data, this is 2017 data. Unfortunately, just compiling the sort of property tax revenue data from all of the states in the entire country just has a lag period associated with it. So this is 2017 data. So those are the 3 pages of rankings. The last 2 pages in these charts are their tables associated with corporate income tax and individual income tax, and they actually just provide a bit more nuance to the individual and corporate income tax information on the front. They give a bit of information in terms of how many brackets they have, what their kind of bracket spread is, and then also a bit of information regarding deductions and personal retentions, and to give you just a bit of a flavor for their tax base. So obviously, it would take many more pages than just a 1-page table to really get a clearer picture of what their tax base are. So with that, I would happily stand for any questions or on that, or if anything has any further requests, kind of.
Thank you, Eddie. Any questions? I just want to thank you for putting this together because, there is quite a bit of buzz about our overall tax rate burdens, and to see it, with per capita and personal and so forth, really good information, especially in a time when money is tight. So thank you for that. All right. All right, moving on. We're going to talk now about capital availability for businesses, and we have David Stauffer from the Department of Commerce. Is he here?
Participating via Zoom, so
Oh, okay, great.
Definitely we'll get him queued up as the pinned screen.
Here we go. Can you guys hear me?
Turn this microphone on. David, can you go ahead and try again?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Pretty well.
Might just be the case that everybody in the room has to be, quiet for it, but,
You can try to move closer to the mic if that works. Is this better?
yes.
Okay, I'll just sit here, make it a little easier. But good morning, Chairwoman, Vice Chairman, members of the committee. As mentioned, my name is David Sofer, Legislative and Policy Director at the Kansas Department of Commerce. And first of all, it's really good to see and hear so many familiar faces. Even though it's only been a few months, it kind of feels like a year since we've all been in the same building. So it's really nice to again hear and see you guys, and certainly we appreciate the opportunity to testify today. And first I want to make sure, obviously, we wish hopefully you and your families are all doing well during these difficult times. It's certainly been a challenge from our end at the department. It's no secret small businesses across our state are struggling for a variety of reasons. Part of what we've tried to do is address some of the issues they're facing. And so let me see if I can share the PowerPoint here. Okay, so it doesn't seem like I can share the PowerPoint, but if you guys look at it in front of you, I'll let you know kind of when we switch slides here. So just to quickly cover some background on sort of where the department stands as far as, finance and capital options. Historically, at least for the last decade and a half, the department has not really been a loan-based department. For the most part, we rely on partnerships outside of our department in order to be able to run those. So one of the big partnerships we have is with Network Kansas. They were formed about 16, 17 years ago. They utilize some of our funding, and they're really devoted to loans and capital options for small businesses. So we value our partnership with them. They've historically been our go-to if small businesses contact us for loans, and they're really a great resource for that. But at the same time, when this hit in March, we realized that we're going to need to adapt to what businesses need from us right now. So we've been working tirelessly on various options to be able to address the ever-evolving needs that businesses are facing today as a result of COVID-19. So two programs I'm going to cover with you today are the Hire Fund, which was launched in March, and then the Business Grant Program, which was done through our Coronavirus Relief Fund on the federal side through the CARES Act. And that'll be launching here pretty shortly, and so I'll walk you through that. Another item which I did not discuss, but was a business option, was our community development block grants received funding through the CARES Act, and we were able to fund over 120 communities, and those grants were for businesses to be able to help for various capital expenses and payroll. But in order to do that, you had to have a majority, 51% of your payroll had to be dedicated towards low or moderate income. That was based on federal guidance and a requirement from the Fed. So we had to make sure that communities match that when they distribute the funds. But that funding has pretty much dried up. And so that's why I did not necessarily go into detail, but certainly I've sent you emails on that in the previous couple of months, and certainly I'm happy to answer any questions if there are on those. But moving on to the next slide, onto the Hire Fund. Hire Fund is a hospitality industry relief emergency fund. We launched it on March 20th, actually. So, if you remember, the legislature just got done with the budget and all its pending items on March 19th. So that Friday, the 20th, we decided to quickly put this together. The reason why is while we didn't necessarily know the long-term impacts of COVID-19, it was pretty apparent from, the 2 weeks as it was starting to spread within the United States, and it was known that the hospitality industry was going to be immediately hit. Events were starting to get canceled. Restaurants were starting to either limit its operations or close down entirely. So we really wanted to act immediately so we could be able to get capital to the hands of those businesses so they can help with their operations. So we partnered with Network Kansas, as I mentioned, and we provided $5 million in short-term, zero-interest loans for the hospitality sector. That money came from the job creation fee. Normally, for those of you certainly not familiar with our department, the job creation fund is normally our deal closing fund. We use it in order to send businesses to come to Kansas, but because of its flexibility and statute, it allowed us to be able to utilize it for this purpose. And frankly, we're proud to have deployed JCF in such a manner, that required very little, very quick timing, and that we were able to prioritize helping to get capital to existing Kansas businesses. So examples of types of, businesses that were included in this were restaurants, bars, lodging, and conference event centers. If you turn to the next slide, you'll see that eligible use of funds. Really, we wanted to make sure that businesses that applied and received capital would be able to make immediate payments, and that money would be well spent and kind of trickle back into the economy, so to help them and continue to move that money into the economy, into our state economy. So examples are commercial loan payments, utility bills, payroll, inventory, things like that. Those are prime examples of what that money was meant to be used for. On the next slide, the eligibility, again, so you had to be a for-profit business, maintain a staff of fewer than 100 employees, have no outstanding state tax obligations, and also be willing to submit a personal guarantee of repayment from the owners of the business. So if you go to the next slide, it really begins to talk about how we disperse that money. So we released this, I would say it was either 9 or 10 a.m. that Friday. We received 900 applications within the first 24 hours. And by the following Monday, I think it was Tuesday, we had already allocated the entire $5 million. We've also received 1,800 applications to date. So 344 loans were allocated, and with an average of 14, each loan, the average was 14,500. If you look at it, we tried to make sure that we hit all different geography areas of the state. So Douglas, Johnson, Shawnee, and Wyandotte counties received about $2 million to total to 136 different businesses. Sedgwick County received $1 million to 68 businesses, and then the remaining $2 million was allocated across the state to about 140 different businesses. Currently, we do not have any more funding available in this program, but we've left the option open. So, if we do receive, we're trying to figure out and work with companies on how to get money back. We've had various companies that have requested an extension. Originally, they were not supposed to make payment for the first 4 months, but due to hardships, and again, us not necessarily knowing how long this would last, we are working with companies. The last thing we want to do is hurt our companies by requiring them to pay back right now. So we're certainly working with them on being able to figure out a payment plan that works for them, but also make sure that the state does recover its funds if the business does make it through. And last we checked, we do believe over three quarters of the businesses that we did provide funding to have made it through, and so we are very hopeful that we should be able to cover a very large portion of those funds in the long run. So this was a very good program that we were able to put together with very little time. And next, I want to cover the business grants. So this program, which was allocated by Spark, so in phase 2 of the Spark committee, agencies were asked to come to put together some plans to be able to address some of the needs that our state has. The Department of Commerce took it and approached it on two different big issues. Business grants to address both small businesses and businesses that potentially help us out with respect to PPE, development and research, and other items such as those, and then also the connectivity broadband. I'm not going to cover connectivity and broadband today, but both these programs will be up and running very shortly, and really excited about being able to get those dollars out. So what does the business grants entail? We presented a program that was broken down into 4 different categories. $32.5 million in small business and not-for-profit grants, which would be the big piece that we covered today. 7 million related to COVID R&D and product development. And then 22 million in grants for in-state COVID-related and PPE manufacturing. The reason for this is one of the big items that we've heard from countless roundtables and talks with our small businesses is, we're hearing about fear of, again, consumer confidence. So while our businesses are open, our businesses want to make sure that our customers feel welcome, safe, and also that their employees feel safe, so that if unfortunately an employee is sick, that isn't spread to the entire, payroll, the entire employment of that business, and then that business has to shut down. Those are important things that we wanted to make sure we address. So to start with the small business grants, we go to the next slide. We are going to have a central online portal for all applications. In order to be eligible, the business must be under 500 employees, which is it's a category under the Small Business Administration with the federal government. So we use that as kind of the limit. And then you have to demonstrate a 25% loss or greater over the 6 months before the pandemic. And you must provide an intended use of those funds because, again, we want to make sure that all the dollars we give out are to businesses that need it in order to help cover expenses that are immediate. They must meet the federal guidelines set forth by the CARES Act. And that's pretty straightforward. The Treasury has put forward that the state is responsible if any money is spent in a way that the Treasury has not set forth in their guidelines. We want to make sure that the state is not held responsible. And we want to make sure companies spend it the way it's intended to. And then the last part of this is, again, we will be working with private sector partners. So I'm talking about the Kansas Restaurant Hospitality Association, Kansas Venue Coalition, those types of groups that really understand their sector very well and can help us with being able to review applications and be able to make recommendations that can really get this money out in the most effective and efficient way. So you go to the next page, applications are going to be broken down by following sectors. So it's entertainment venues, arts, retail, professional services, manufacturing, personal services, not-for-profits, and then other. The last three, so grocery, meat processors, and specialty producers are technically, when I mentioned there were four components, this is the fourth. It's security. It's part of the securing local food systems component that was passed by CARES. It's going to be housed in Commerce because we have the online portal, so it will make it easier and more efficient to run. That program is really going to be a big component with KDA, the Department of Agriculture, and so they're going to be a huge help and really be responsible for putting that forward. So I'm really going to focus on the other 8. The reason we chose these sectors is these are the sectors we believe that either A, were not addressed in the CARES Act. So if you take not-for-profits, for example, a large amount of our state's not-for-profits saw $0 through PPP. They were not eligible. They've been hurting really bad and desperately need help. Also, if you take entertainment venues, other than PPP, they have seen no additional help. We know that entertainment venues are going to be probably the longest, the hardest hit as a result of the pandemic because it is going to take them the longest to be able to get back to up and running at anywhere near any capacity, let alone full capacity. So we want to really be able to help them out. Hopefully the feds will come through at some point with an additional stimulus and bump them up even more. Right now, so many of them just need a little desperate for capital just to kind of get through and get to the other, to just get a few months down the line. So again, these applications will be on our system on Thursday, and I'll talk about a little bit on how that's going to work. But if you go to the next slide, so second part of it, COVID R&D. How can our state help end the pandemic? We know that obviously Kansas is not alone. Certainly the entire world is facing this, but what can we do to be able to help both our state and our country help, put an end to this pandemic sooner rather than later? So we're looking for creative ideas as it goes to, whether it becomes rapid testing, treatment solutions, Other developments in bioscience, I know our university system are doing a lot. There's private companies that are looking for access to capital to be able to address some of those. It's really important to be able to fund those and hope that we all work together to be able to put an end to it. So the hope is that, that funding will go towards product development and certainly they're going to have to show that the product development will be able to be, again, produced on a rather rapid basis and be able to address the pandemic, relatively soon. And that's, first of all, it's common sense. We're going to utilize those dollars. It has to be for benefit in the short and long term, but also it also has to meet federal guidelines as we discussed. So that's pretty important to make sure that we address. Lastly, we've got the PPE manufacturing and grants. So what that is we need help with our supply chain to be able to get businesses PPE, whether it be masks, hand sanitizers, various items that are desperately needed, again, as I mentioned, in order to not only increase the safety of employees, but also to be able to provide a safe place for consumers to come. And we want to make sure we boost consumer confidence in our state, so that will increase spending and again, help our financial situation, which is all in the last hour. So we are looking at in-state options for PPE production and manufacturing. That's our priority. If we absolutely need to, we can look out of state, but our goal really right now is to try to focus on in-state options. And we want to help provide funding to businesses who need to acquire PPE and other related materials. So that way, again, they can feel safe and they feel confident. The business will have to demonstrate a need for training, equipment, or modifications in order to improve health of workers or customers. So last slide. So, how is this all going to work out? Well, so what we've decided to do is that on Thursday at 4 p.m., our applications will be posted on our website. And we're going to allow time for folks to review our applications. We have a chat function that was originally launched as a result to help folks apply for PPP and other SBA-related programs. We've kept that chat function, and we are now going to beef up that staffing. We're actually going to have someone available 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, to be able to help out businesses and other groups that need help with the application process and questions, so they can best be prepared. And then at some point next week, I think we're working on finalizing a date here pretty shortly. So I do apologize, I don't have the specific data right now, but it should be sometime middle next week. We're going to make the applications live. And then folks will be able to apply for those grants depending on the sector and what they're looking for. And then we will have a team that will review score as the applications come in so we can get money out the door. The reason why we need to do it that way is just because we do have limitations on our staff's capabilities. It would be very difficult to score 100,000 applications at once. So we are trying to create as much awareness as possible. We are probably going to send out information to each and every one of you. If you can help promote it on your pages, it would be tremendously helpful so each business knows when the applications are live, what they need to do, and we give them enough time to get their questions answered so they can be able to send in those applications when the site goes live. Our goal here is threefold. A, cut red tape, transparency, and we want to be able to level the playing field. I think if we can do all that, this program should hopefully run very successfully, and we'll be able to get dollars to a lot of people that we need. With that, I conclude, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, David. Very good, lots of information. I'm sure there's questions from the committee. I see the first one from Senator Tyson.
If I may, Madam Chair, I actually have a couple of questions.
That's perfectly okay.
Thank you. And I appreciate the presentation. Thank you for the information. I'm glad that you are going to send it. One of my questions was that you would forward or send us the links on those applications. I think we have many constituents that are interested in those programs. I would ask also, do you have a dollar amount breakdown on the slide for page 9 as to where the money's gonna go for each of those programs? How much money is it?
Yeah, so we're still finalizing those numbers. That's the reason why I did not share them, but I will be able to share them hopefully, I believe in the next 24 hours. So I'll be happy to send it to the entire committee.
I'm curious as to the breakout of entertainment versus arts.
Sure. I think entertainment's, I think arts is going to be one of our smaller ones. The reason why is that if they did receive specialty funding through the CARES Act, through the NEA, but we still know of a lot of shortages in funding and a lot of groups that badly need access to capital that it simply is not available to them. And so we did want to make some monies available, but again, I should be able to get you that breakdown here in the next 24 hours.
Yes, and I understand the arts are important. Most people probably don't know. I went on athletic scholarship, an art scholarship, and academic scholarships to college. But under the situation that we're facing, I know that food and families do not have resources to income that they used to have to. It is tragic what is going on. So I'm hoping that as a state, we set our priorities where they need to be under this pandemic. And if you would get us that financial breakdown as soon as possible, I think that would be critical. Also, are you considering removing any rules and regulations, any waivers in order to help businesses and economic development thrive in the state of Kansas?
I guess I'm not sure about which rules and waivers you're talking about. Specifically with this program, we have to follow the rules and regulations that the federal government has put forth, and those are the ones that we're following. But is there any specific ones you're talking about?
Well, I can give you an example, but there's many specific ones. But for example, with the meat processors, we have rules and regulations that are stifling to some of our small processors. In fact, they're choosing not to be state inspected anymore. Some of them are going custom or actually going out of business. And we have been putting these companies out of business for several years now. And I'm hoping that the state will start taking a good look at what we're doing. We're over-regulating with not the results that are needed for those regulations. I mean, there was no issue to begin with, and we're putting these regulations in. So I hope that we look at that. We need more meat processors now, not less. And as I said, we keep putting them out of business. There's if we take a blanket look at rules and regulations for the state, I think you would see that in many places. And I would ask that the administration and the Department of Commerce may be helpful in initiating some of that effort to remove those rules and regulations.
Sure. I mean, our goal is to streamline, and certainly we'll have those conversations with the administration, Department of Agriculture, specifically on the meat side, but in general as well.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we'll go to Senator Solon-Trofton, Senator Clayton, Representative Clayton, and Senator Hilbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got two quick questions. On your slide number 10, page 5, you identify how the state can contribute. In that, you indicate that what you're looking for is treatment solutions and other developments in bioscience. Have you identified companies in Kansas that can provide treatment solutions?
Sure. So there are a variety of pharmaceutical companies, including lately the last one was Pfizer. They're opening up a plant to be able to help mass produce. I don't remember the name. I'm going to mispronounce the name. Remdesivir. That's called a pill that helps address, that has at least through studies shown that there is help with being able to address some of the serious effects of the coronavirus. So that pill is now going to be at least somewhat partially manufactured here in Kansas, the other places as well. But that's part of it. Again, we're looking at areas where we could maybe look at rapid testing. Currently, our testing system, while working in some places, is not working in others. There's a lot of it's taking time to be able to get results, and if we can't get results, in a timely manner, those tests, while somewhat helpful, are potentially causing further spread. So we are aware, and I can't comment necessarily on specific names of companies as it's still, some of these items are pending, but there are companies that are looking at how can we do rapid testing that where testing can get results within a few hours. So that's the type of items we're really looking at. So what I'm saying again, so how can the state help contribute? It's not only within Kansas, it's also within how can we help our, the country. Kansas should be a model for our country, and certainly anything we can do to help and we all work together, that would really be a benefit for all of us.
I'm sorry, I'm not, I heard everything you said, but have you been in communication with these companies and explained to them what you can do and how you can assist them and encourage them to begin development?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. Can you repeat that?
Have you been in communication with these companies and
Yes.
told them or expressed to them what you can do, how you can support them?
Yes, so we've
encourage
been,
them to begin work in these areas.
yes, sorry. So we have been in communication with these companies. Again, because some of these items are pending, in some instances, we have NDAs that I can't exactly comment on specific company names, but we have companies that are interested. We've got companies that really have got some genuine ideas, but they're going to have to show practicality in order to receive funding from the state. But we are cautiously optimistic that we should be able to see some really good items come to the market here in the coming months.
Okay, technical question, Madam Chair. On slide 6, page 3, your last statement is we have left open potential possibilities if things change. Can you clarify that statement for me?
Sure. So as I mentioned in my testimony, right now we've put out the $5 million. This isn't an item that was budgeted. We had money that was in our JCF account that we were a little flexible with and we could put out there. But we haven't really seen any payments come back just because, again, most folks who took out loans are still struggling and we're trying to balance their needs in order to be able to survive. So if we are able to see an improvement and certainly in payments start coming back into commerce, and we have that flexibility, we will certainly be happy to, look at providing more loans. So that's why we are still accepting applications. But as of right now, we just do not have any funding available to be able to get money out to those applicants.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and David, thank you for your testimony. I have a question in particular, and Senator Stoltenbach touched on this a little bit earlier, but one of the things that I started to notice in February is that we started seeing a lot of companies sort of self-regulating long before government stepped in, started seeing companies canceling travel, especially canceling those larger conferences. My legislative district in Johnson County has a lot of those larger venues, most notably our convention centers and our hotels, who have been taking major hits due to those private companies taking those proper actions in order to preserve their workforces. Government can open up whenever we want to, but we don't know when the private companies are going to decide, okay, it's time for us to start having larger conferences. So to that end, and to sort of piggyback on that line, currently we don't have any more funding available for the Hires Act, but looking at that, anything that the Commerce Department is looking at in regards to those larger conference venues, knowing that it might take private companies a lot longer to determine that it's safe, even after we tell them that it's fine. So tell me what that looks like.
Sure. Thank you for your question. you know, one of the things we're looking at, obviously right now, most state budgets are in a bind. So we certainly understand that state resources are very constrained. And so we've been lobbying our federal counterparts, the administration has been lobbying to be able to get help for those sectors that badly need it. And certainly we're not alone. Every state has done some type of lobbying to the same degree. Unfortunately, it's going to take a major effort, hopefully from the federal government, to be able to help out some of these sectors that, frankly, are just not going to recover completely until, we've got this pandemic completely addressed, or, at least there's consumer confidence enough to where people are flying, people are traveling, people are going to hotels, people do not mind gathering. I'm not a health expert, so I can't tell you exactly when that's going to be. That's probably a better question for, folks at KDHE. But from our end, we view it as, we believe this is going to go well into 2021. So our hope is really that, the federal government is able to help out. And again, certainly if we have, funding that comes back, we're happy to get it back out and help any way we can. But for the most part, most financial assistance at the moment is available through the feds or through local banking.
Thank you. Madam Chair, may I have one more question, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I didn't really see this touched on very much in the presentation here, but regarding airline manufacturing in particular, obviously in Wichita, the company, what is the Department of Commerce looking at doing to help that sector? Because obviously that's one of our most important ones. So I've got concerns there. Would you mind addressing those, please? Thank you.
Sure. So Wichita obviously is very heavily, aviation, it's aviation dominated. Certainly that's their top sector. If you look at what happened, Spirit started furloughing, well before the pandemic as a result of the Boeing issue. And then as we kind of hit in March, Textron had a massive furlough announcement as well, and that's kind of just continued on. So that's the reason why the south central area of our state has the highest amount of unemployment and is really struggling in a bad way. And I think one of the things we're looking to do is, so Spirit has been innovative. They've started producing ventilators and manufacturing ventilators and other items that could potentially be useful to be able to buy some time and be able to keep their employees on payroll and also be able to help contribute to the economy. And so certainly that's one item. Another program we have is in our workforce department. So it allows individuals who want to convert, who are in manufacturing and want to convert into the health sector. There's a program that is available through federal funding to be able to do that. And then it really helps provide a linkage to them, to the health sector, to be able to find a job. So that's another way we've been trying to address some of the unemployment issues. But the reality of the aviation sector, unfortunately, right now is until we kind of get flying to a comfortable state where people feel safe and comfortable flying, we're really going to see some challenges, in the next year and change potentially until we get to that point. It seems a lot of folks would feel comfortable if there's a vaccine. So if that's kind of, again, this is probably more for KDHE, but if that's kind of the standard, that may take some time until we're able to get a vaccine that's spread throughout our country. So those are some challenges we see. There's no silver bullet here. I think we've got to continue to try to work with our local officials to be able to recruit businesses to Wichita that may not be necessarily aviation dependent, but also be able to help our aviation companies adapt, for the moment, to be able to get through these times where we know, in the future, in the coming years, things will be brighter.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Clayton, for that question. We have Senator Hildebrand on the line with a question.
Thank you, David.
I've got two questions if I could. The first question is, does the Kansas Department of Commerce currently have a list of businesses that have shut down, the number? And if so, do you guys also have a projection of what you guys are projecting the total business closure to be from the effects of the shutdowns that we have had?
We do not have a list. Normally the list of business entities is within the Secretary of State. So I don't know if they might have an accurate list of that. They would probably be a source. We can certainly check in on that. As far as an estimate goes, I don't have an estimate as of right now. We did have an estimate that was probably a little generous. That was under, 5%, but that was initially. I don't know. We have to regather the data. So I don't have a number that I feel comfortable sharing today. It's ever evolving. We don't know when this is going to end, and that's really the problem. Is until we've got a comfortability knowing when we might be able to get folks who feel comfortable going back to somewhat normal life. That data is just going to continue to change.
Your last comment segues perfectly to my last question. Does the Department of Commerce have a plan to start doing something to promote consumer confidence to help out the businesses? Is there a future plan? Is there a plan in place? Are you guys working on a plan? Or is this something you guys have even considered?
So again, I think part of the plan is we've got to make sure that businesses have what they need. At the moment, there are a lot of businesses that don't. So that's something we're making sure to try to address. And then as we feel comfortable with more businesses saying they've got the access to PPE, that they've kind of outfitted their business to feel safe, and then I think we'll be able to do a better promotion. But right now, we've heard back from our businesses that they need more in order to be able to feel completely safe and be able to promote a safe atmosphere. So these are things that environment. So we want to make sure that we do that first, and then we're able to promote. But certainly we've been trying to help businesses in any way we can, and that's part of the reason why we want to make sure they have access to the resources they need.
Madam Chair, can I have a follow-up? Please.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
David, on that, you said you're talking to businesses and businesses are saying they need more, but you've not given us any specifics of what that more is. Can you give us a little bit more specific of what our businesses in Kansas are needing more of? What do they need to be successful? Do they need less regulations? Do they need less oversight? What is it they're needing? Do they need, obviously they need more business, but how are we helping them to get that more business? And what is the Department of Commerce's plan, short-term and long-term, to help those businesses?
Sure. So as I mentioned, in the short term, again, there's a lot of folks that need access to basic things like hand sanitizer still, masks, fiberglass to be able to put up in front of their cashiers. Those types of things that really are necessary right now and are part of our everyday life in order to be able to keep their employees and their consumers safe. We've been trying to cut red tape as much as we can every step of the way that we've found a way to do so within that falls within the department. We're trying to get funding out. But regarding promotion, again, this is something that we're still working with the chamber. I don't know that we have a final plan. We're working with our local chambers, with our business groups. How can we best help? How can we address those needs? Those are conversations that are still ongoing. But again, the top thing that we've heard is help us get PPE, help us outfit our businesses to get safe, so we could be able to promote a safe environment to our consumers. And so we're working to address that as quickly as we can.
And Madam Chair, I apologize. It brought up one more question for me, if I may.
Go ahead.
There is still $25 million left over from the COVID relief funding that the state had put in the budget this last fiscal year. Is the Department of Commerce, since the businesses are saying we need PPE, are you guys trying to make an effort to get some of that to help businesses, or What are you guys doing to help get that PPE?
Sure. What I'll say, I think is a little bit complicated because I don't know. I don't know the status of the governor's allotments. I believe part of that affected the state coronavirus relief fund. That's probably research might be good folks to ask about that specific component. But we do have an outstanding request for $5 million for JCF. The hope is if we get more funds, we'll have more flexibility to be able to do things, both help bring businesses that might be able to address some of the supply, but also help our existing businesses with programs that we've discussed, such as the higher then capital can be used to do that. It's really a twofold problem, right? So some businesses cannot afford it. That's where these programs, such as the business grants, come in handy. Another issue is the supply chain. That's not unique to Kansas. We're seeing it nationwide. It's getting better, but nonetheless, since it's going to be part of our economy, probably at least for the next year, if not longer, depending who you ask and how you predict hygiene practices will be in the upcoming years, we really need to be able to have more companies based in Kansas, especially less reliance on countries like China, to be able to get some of those items and be able to address the needs and get businesses those supplies in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, I'm going to have to cut you off, Senator Hildebrand. We're running low on time, and I appreciate your participation. So you might want to follow up at a later, maybe later today. You can follow up. So thank you for participating. Really quickly, I'm going to have Representative Williams and Senator Tyson with their questions, and then we're going to try to adjourn right at noon for lunch.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will try to go very, very quickly. Just two things. One, a clarification on the website. Are we going to provide that for us so that we can drop that to our businesses and have them ready at 4 o'clock, or are they going to have to wait and go to the Commerce website to get that? That's my first quick question.
So we're going to send an email out. In that email, you'll have a specific link where the applications will be. So Thursday at 4 p.m., that's when you'll be able to access those applications. And then you will not be able to submit until later next week. And we will provide that data in the email as well. So you'll be able to have all that information that you can share with your constituents. And certainly, if there are any questions, as always, I'm available via email, phone. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, and then my last question is actually just a summarization. We've got over $60 million that will be potentially available, and I just want to make sure I understand this right so that when we're communicating with our businesses that may be interested. First, it's a business grant, so it's likely forgivable loans, and it's mostly, it looks like it's not for unemployment compensation, it's mostly to provide safe environment, research, those types of things to create a protective environment. And thirdly, on slide 8, so I wanted to add those items, making sure I'm understanding correctly. And then thirdly, on slide 8, you have something in here I just wanted you to touch base on, and the qualifications. And one of the qualifications is that they have to demonstrate 25% loss or greater over 6 months prior to the pandemic. And I don't know if you already hit on that, but I just wanted some explanation on that. So basically, they have to be failing or not doing well prior when the pandemic hit, and then, for example, hospitality, that's when their lives were cut out. Perhaps I misunderstood, or perhaps I didn't hear when you communicated that. Thank you.
Sure. So, and I apologize, you cut out a little bit, but I think I understand your question. So the 6 months is going to be, if I'm correct, and I have to double check it, I'll get back to you. I believe it's going to be looked at from 6/1 to 12/31, and then a revenue of from January to the end of June of this year, and look at 25%. The reason behind that is because we want to make sure that the companies that are receiving these funds, because we have a limited amount of them, are really in need, in desperate need. And certainly we also have to match the guidelines by the federal government that specifically address that a company must show that they were harmed as a result of the coronavirus. So certainly if your revenue has gone up, or as flat, it would be very difficult to show that. So this is our way of being able to address those two items.
Further questions? Okay, now we have Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have heard from several of the committee members about removing bureaucracy and removing regs, and also communicating with the business industry. I'm hoping you take those suggestions to heart. I will also add to that, especially in the Wichita area, Textron and other companies, we've had that conversation for repurposing, and have you reached out to the White House? Prime example, the repurposing that's going on with Kodak. Those are things that we could look at in the state of Kansas and Wichita, and to bring our economy back and thrive. And I hope, have you considered reaching out to the White House? Have you done that? I mean, there's companies like Tesla that are looking for new homes. Have we reached out to those corporations? What are we doing as an initiative, and not just a pandemic, but to help our state in the future?
Sure. So specifically on Tesla, we did have an offer to Tesla. We were not chosen as a finalist. I don't know that we've gotten the feedback on exactly why, so I'm not sure I can share why, but we have certainly reached out and tried to get creative with bringing jobs back into our economy. With respect to companies repurposing, we have had those conversations with companies, and we've had those dialogues with our federal government, both with our electeds and through DC folks and the administration. So we're trying as much as we can. There's a lot of complexities into whether a company can do it or not, but certainly those that can, like Spirit, are choosing to do it, and we have been trying to help in any way we can to help make that as seamless as possible.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the efforts of the department and the work that they're pushing forward. I would ask that when you get the information on Tesla, why we did not make the final or the cut, if you would please relay that information to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Representative Tarwater, and I think that will close us out.
Thank you, David. I had a couple of quick questions. The first one is, you had stated that the $5 million in loans, you have had zero payback so far, and that all the businesses are still struggling. Can you share with the committee the terms of these loans? Are they open-ended, or is it defined on when they will pay it back? And then secondly, was there any collateral or personal guarantees? What if these companies don't make it and they don't ever pay it back? Will there be tax implications for the individuals or the companies, or how does all that work?
Sure. So I should clarify, when we haven't had, we've had some minimal payments. We've not had nearly the amount that we've expected when we initially introduced it. But it's not nearly enough to be able to go back out and provide additional loans. I'm not sure I have to get back to you on the exact amount of the term on how long the loan is, but I do know it's zero interest and no payments for the first 4 months. So the goal here was not for the state to necessarily try to make a profit. The goal was really, again, we know you're hurting. We're trying to help you with as quickly as possible. No red tape. Here's capital, and there are personal guarantees. I'll have to consult with my chief counsel as to what exactly those mean, and figure out, and I can provide that to you in a follow-up email. But that's what I've been advised as far as what we do have available to us if companies don't pay back.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question is regarding the grants for the PPE manufacturing. I have met with a few companies that are looking at opening their businesses in Kansas to create the PPE for the Kansas hospitals and Kansas businesses. That requires a significant investment in warehousing, machinery, and manpower. These companies are already willing to do this. My question is, when you choose who gets these grants, what do you tell these other companies that are making their own investments, and how's that gonna work? How are they gonna be able to compete against somebody that we gave a grant to as a real business?
You're talking about how will companies that are outside of our state currently be able to compete with companies we gave grants to?
No, sir, how will a Kansas company compete against another Kansas company that we have given a grant to for the same business?
Sure. Well, this doesn't necessarily prevent current companies that are producing PPE, if they can show they can produce, utilize the funds to be able to produce it at a more rapid pace, and certainly they would qualify for the grant. This is not strictly for new companies.
Okay, so if there are 30 applications, then you'll take that money and spread it out evenly, or will you choose somebody to invest in, possibly closing another company?
So I don't have the scoring matrix exactly in front of me, so I can't answer exactly how it will be scored. The goal here is to be able to reach as many businesses as possible, while also assuring that we increase the supply flow. So if you're an existing business and you can help increase the supply flow, certainly that would be you would qualify. So those are things we're looking at. But I can't attest to exactly how many companies will receive funds at this point. Depends on the amount of applications we receive.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Really good morning this morning. We are running short on time, so what I'm going to do at this point is we're going to go ahead and adjourn for lunch, but we're going to be back here at 1 o'clock because we have an incredible presentation by KBA that we don't want to miss. And unfortunately, we've got some people that are following that we have to accommodate. So thank you. We'll see you right at 1. We are at recess.
Thanks for allowing me.
Okay. Oh, man. Okay.